The Sonic series has been going on for quite some time now, and naturally during the course of its existence, it's dabbled in all sorts of media, not the least cartoons, anime and other such visual mediums. The Sonic cartoons have been quite popular for the time periods they've came out in, and they are consistently getting renewed with a brand new coat of paint. SonicX was one around the early 2000s, and by now it gets overlooked a lot in modern conversations. But this is understandable as it's aged quite a bit in that time since release. However, there are a fair few elements of SonicX that I believe have actually impacted the series overall, some for the greater good, some not so much, and others will just depend down on the individual. But they're not really talked about too much. The SonicX series is now kind of looked at negatively as a general consensus amongst the fans, and the few that are a bit lighter towards SonicX tend to be so only in the context of the sub or the original script. And yes, Christopher Thorndike really doesn't help when we're trying to discuss the merits of SonicX, because for the most part he did bring down the experience, but we're not here to focus on him. Instead, I want to look at the things that SonicX has created and developed for or from the games, ideas that the games themselves would adopt either directly or by drawing inspiration from. Some of these elements have even become mainstays, or were at the very least iconic for the time period they were put out. Let's just start big. Shadow the Hedgehog inhibitor rings. This is such a cool element to Shadow's character that's been toyed with here and there ever since, but it didn't originate in Sonic Adventure 2. It was SonicX that first put it out for the world to see, as they used it as a way of explaining it would enhance his powers, but it also tied into why he died in the end of Adventure 2, because you can look at the in-game dialogue all you want. At the end of the day, it is still strange that Shadow would die and Sonic wouldn't during the ending of Adventure 2. But the inhibitor rings and the reasoning behind limiting Shadow's power and the consequences of that really helped make it make more sense. But it doesn't just address that scene, it can be used for other reasons, which we see both SonicX do, but Sega themselves as well, with Sonic 06, Shadow's amazing ending for his campaign using the inhibitor rings. That's the first time the games make reference to that function, and it's clearly directly inspired and drawn from the events of Sonic X. And obviously, that has become a mainstay element to Shadow's character because it's still here to this day. Something I'm not a fan of, but Sonic X did do a good job of establishing, is the two worlds concept that we've all been fighting over for ages. If you didn't catch the news, it's been debunked officially. There is no such thing as two worlds. Let's not go there again. But Sonic X, separate from that discussion, showed Sonic's world as a completely unique planet compared to the one that Chris Thorndike was from, but during the events of Chaos Control, the two would start merging with one another, bringing both species in contact with each other. Now, I have no issue with games like Adventure, where it established, yes, Sonic's world has always actually been shared with the humans, but as far as stories where they are two separate worlds, Sonic X, I think, was way better than the very loose and not defined concept that Sega was trying to push in the 2010s. You get to see the iconic landmasses crashing in with the more mundane human ones, and how human society that didn't evolve alongside all the wacky Sonic stuff has to try and adapt, understand, or become normalized to the more mystical, wacky and wild Sonic elements, and it creates a nice dynamic. The characters of Sonic the Hedgehog also got a lot of development and spicing up during Sonic X run. Of course, we did know what these characters were like before Sonic X existed, but considering this was a cartoon and the first one to take place in the modern era, there was plenty of room for growth and exploration. Knuckles the Echidna is one of the characters who benefited a lot in some ways and perhaps a little bit less in others from his inclusion in Sonic X. A lot of people, especially old-timers who are around from the beginning, will have a very strong image of Knuckles being a rival to Sonic. Sometimes friendly, sometimes not as much, but a rival to Sonic. But if you've focused in on the modern era, 2010s, and then today, that's not so easily palatable. Sure, you can imagine them doing it, but they've never really been at each other in the way that older fans will go on about. But Sonic X, despite being set in the modern time period and running through past the events of Adventure 2 and Heroes, which is where the game Knuckles really did mellow down, Sonic X Knuckles maintains that rivalry with Sonic in a believable way. You don't disbelieve it when it's on the screen. They do get on each other's nerves. Both of them get annoyed. Sonic teases Knuckles a lot. Knuckles smashes things. They try to make up later, maybe, and it's pretty funny to watch. But only Sonic X maintained that, because like I say, around Heroes or SA2, Knuckles mellows out and loses that angle, which, if it's done right with development and new places for their characters to go, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're one of those people that really liked Sonic and Knuckles still working together but not necessarily being the best of friends all the time, Sonic X had it for you. On the flip side though, Sonic X also really exaggerated Knuckles' short fuse tendencies, making him very easy to anger and making him quite a bit more gullible than he was before, though to be fair, you can argue that the games making him fall for Eggman multiple times did that for him anyway. But that's been a criticism people have held for Knuckles in Sonic X, so depending on your personal perspectives, you might like it a lot or think it was quite bad for the character. In a similar vein, Amy Rose also had a bunch of character stuff going on in Sonic X. Now, Game Amy, at this point in history, was nice, polite, very caring. She was good at discerning people's emotions and getting people to empathize with one another, and was able to break through barriers that most other people would have failed. So she didn't need to resort to action as much because she would find other ways around it to resolve the situation. But if the hammer dropped, so to speak, she would be able to fight back with her own. Not as well as Sonic, but she was able to defend herself a bit. Sonic X Amy is still able to defend herself a bit, but a bit like with Knuckles, they really took character traits that were quite minor or understated and then blew them up a lot. Her stalking behaviour that people have memed or complained about for ages, Sonic X really is the source of that. Even if you could argue the way she chased Sonic in CD or Adventure 1 was breaching on stalkerish, especially in Adventure 1, apart from chasing him, she doesn't actually try to stalk him throughout the game. She meets him once, says, "You need to help me protect this bird," and then kind of just drags Sonic along with her. So it's not stalking, but Sonic X, she's always on about Sonic, all the time, always looking for him, and always annoyed when his interest is not to just spend time with her. Sonic X really pushed the angle. Now, it was done to comedic effect and created a bunch of funny moments between many members of the cast that got wrapped up in it, and she did have other elements of her character shown as well, but not as often as people probably wanted. And yes, Sonic X Amy did leave a negative taste in a lot of people's mouth, and it even spread to the games a little bit with games like Sonic Battle, where Amy has some elements I like, but man, they are really shaded under some strange stuff in that game, which clearly takes inspiration from Sonic X. Sonic Chronicles clearly also takes inspiration from Sonic X with its portrayal of Amy, and I think it does an okay job with that. So again, your perspective is going to determine your thoughts here. Amy and Tails having an actual friendship and interactions with each other is something the games these days likes to pretend is there and is established, and we work under that premise going forward. But if you look at the games, not the comics, just the games, there wasn't many moments that showed Amy and Tails sort of having an actual friendship between each other. SA2, there was a bit of it. Tails helping Amy out in SA1 under Sonic's orders, there was a bit of it, but for the most part, not much of a relation. However, Sonic X really did flesh out some more mundane character interactions between people who aren't focused on in the games together, and Tails and Amy are probably the chief in that regard, getting a lot of time where even Sonic not being there at all, Tails and Amy are interacting and working together or bickering or however you want. So Sonic X is a huge part of the pillar for Tails and Amy's friendship. Vector and Vanilla and their kind of sort of flirtatious kind of relationship is also completely from Sonic X, because Vanilla's appearance in the game was Advance 2 and Vector's was Heroes. There was no crossover between them, and in the next game to come out, Shadow the Hedgehog or Sonic Battle, again, no connection between them. Sonic X played it up to give Vector another dynamic and play up with his comedy and do something with Vanilla's character, and that stuck around so hard that it's even been mandated by Sega themselves. It must be included and referenced, whereas most other things of that nature are usually forgotten and buried. Sonic the Hedgehog himself also got a bit of this treatment. The Sonic we see in Sonic X is a lot more like pre-adventure Sonic in personality. Not 100%, but he's got a lot more snark, a lot more sass, he's a lot more rude, and he considers the opinions of other people a whole lot less as well. But at the end of the day, he is still a hero. However, his fear of water, as early as the first episode, is really played up to give him a character flaw, to give him dynamics in scenarios where it would otherwise be a standard affair, and just to make the show more interesting. Sonic not being able to swim has always been an element of the character, but usually it was just interpreted as a gameplay mechanic. Sonic X really helped make it more than that, make it an actual character feature where he doesn't know how to swim and he's afraid of the water. Of course, game Sonic isn't really afraid of the water, so this is an exaggeration, but it's thanks to that exaggeration people even associate Sonic and water not being the best friends at all, because otherwise you're not reading the manuals, you're just playing the game, it's a gameplay mechanic, you probably wouldn't think twice of it. But thanks to Sonic X over-exaggerating it, it's a firmly rooted idea in everyone's minds, and at least the funny moments like in the Olympic Games, where during the swimming courses, Sonic is doggy paddling in safety gear because he just doesn't know how to swim. Due to the amount of humans that show up in Sonic X, the show was able to do something the games don't have much of an opportunity, which is to show more glimpses of Dr. Eggman's humanity, since he's surrounded by humans. A lot of the time it's done for laughs or to show how much of an egomaniac he is. However, there are other moments where he has actual heart-to-hearts, even with Chris Thorndike, of all characters. It's quite interesting to see the way he tries to manipulate them during the Eggman X series of episodes, for example. The series is full of these small moments here and there, where it's showing how Eggman acts when he's not just trying to squash Sonic, and he's amongst other people, or even when he's alone and he's just messing around with his robots. You just get a lot more glimpses of Eggman being himself in Sonic X. Dark Sonic is a favourite from this show, even though he's in it for about 17 seconds. And the cool thing about Dark Sonic, the underrated part about Dark Sonic, is that what it really was doing was making use of the idea of negative chaos energy again for the first time since the Perfect Chaos boss fight. That was an element of the Chaos Emeralds that felt like, okay, we're learning a bit more about them. There's more to these glowing rocks. Positive and negative energy, and both can be used. It wasn't well defined, but it was shown at the ending of the game. That's an idea you would hope gets developed in the future. Of course, like many things in Sonic, after it's released, it's completely forgotten and never touched again. But Sonic X's Dark Sonic, as well as being a cool scene, was referencing that mechanic. Jumping back to the relations between characters again though, Knuckles and Rouge had a very interesting dynamic between them. A little bit flirtatious, but also a little bit of an actual rivalry, all wrapped around a bundle of cautious respect. And it was introduced in Rouge's first game, Sonic Adventure 2. It was very, very faintly referenced in the ending of Sonic Heroes, and it kind of maybe is there in Sonic Battle, but also kind of maybe not. And pretty soon after that, Sega would end up just dropping it and not using this element, which in my opinion sucks because it made both the characters have a lot more going for them. You do see it in some subtle inclusions, like with Rouge being teamed with Knuckles for Rivals 2. That relation is clearly why it happened, but for the most part, it's completely dropped, especially in the modern era, I may add, just vanished. However, Sonic X not only continued to use the element that was introduced with Rouge, but really played it up and gave it so many scenes, a lot of them absolutely hilarious, making fun in a good way of both the characters involved. and a lot of people's memories of that dynamic probably stem from SonicX, because it did a lot of the lifting for that. In a more meta sense though, something that was very surprising as you watched it happen, but has happened nonetheless, "Gotta go fast" is basically Sonic's modern day catchphrase now. First it was just a song, then it was a meme, and then it got incorporated into official media, including the popular Sonic movies. "Gotta go fast" comes from SonicX, specifically the American intro of Season 1, Sonic X. But that very obscure origin point has resulted in the current franchise's catchphrase, which is a pretty dang underrated impact, if you ask me, that SonicX provided. Tails' bully scene when he was younger and didn't have many friends before he met Sonic is something we've heard about throughout numerous manuals or in the background information of a game, but rarely actually see. Now, today, Sonic Origins shows a bully scene, and they tie it into also the time Tails starts following Sonic and becoming his friend, which is a very abridged. But Sonic X tackled this first, and I believe it did it better, where you see Tails making an invention, showing his intelligence at a young age, but it getting smashed by bullies, made fun of, and all of that stuff, and then Sonic comes to cheer him up. I like that portrayal a lot better, and it helps separate the time between Sonic getting involved and Tails following Sonic forever, instead of it being an instant he dropped everything right away. But regardless of my take on it, I like the actual portrayal of the bullies breaking a device because it shows other elements of Tails' character. I think it was a well done scene. The last thing I have to talk about is not really an impact that Sonic X has had overall, because it only exists in Sonic X, but I feel like it's worth talking about anyway because it was such a cool idea, and it's the Chaos Emerald interactions that you see especially early on, where they are chaotic, and if you try to put two of them together without giving them enough time to get used to each other, crazy chaos power effects will just start happening. I really love that element. It made it interesting. It's not just about collecting them, it's about collecting them the correct way, and if you don't, something's going to happen that you need to sort out. In fact, whilst we're on that strain of things that only remained in Sonic X but were pretty cool ideas, the character Cosmo has a huge following of dedicated fans, but she's only ever existed in Sonic X. But she had a nice way of uplifting some characters' personalities, bringing out darker sides of Shadow or less seen sides of Tails that people really miss and want to see back. So that's just as valid as all the other relations that Sonic X had pushed forward that people miss as well. So I bet there was a lot more there than you expected, which Sonic X has contributed long term to the Sonic franchise. There's almost definitely some things I've probably left out or forgotten, so feel free to share what you believe was super underrated about Sonic X in the comments down below. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching all the way to the end, it really helps the channel out. Please like, share and subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of content. But until next time, I hope you have a great day. This is the Mighty Emperor, signing off.